and welcome to another in the series of Get the Facts. Of course, this is a relationship between a collaborative effort between Channel 5 and the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Before we get into tonight's show, as per usual, one of the things that we're going to do is give you this week's COVID numbers. Of course, this extends from last week, Monday, to tonight. So it goes from August 16th to August 23rd. The total tests reported were 8,408. Total positive cases reported, 549. Total deaths, 9. Vaccination data. Monday, August 16th to August 23rd, 2021. Total vaccinated for the week, 4,654. Total single vaccinated for the week, 413. Total fully vaccinated for the week, 4,241. Our cumulative data, total vaccinated, 152,484. Total fully vaccinated, 64,901. Of course, that has been our week in numbers for COVID from August 16th to August 23rd. And we're getting ready to jump into our show for tonight. And we're going to be talking, of course, about how does COVID-19 affect children for tonight. And in our first segment, we have Dr. Cecilio Eck, pediatrician from the KHMH, and Dr. Natalia Lagespara Beer, technical advisor, maternal and child health, Ministry of Health and Wellness. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, William.
Good evening. Thanks for having us today.
Good to have you both. Now, let's talk about the impact of COVID on children. And Dr. Eck, let's start first. Is it a real concern?
Yes, it is. But prior to that, I'd like to say thank you for inviting us. I think there's a paucity of programs like this that inform our Belizean public. And I'm glad that this initiative is here. I've been following it and the previous ones, and they're wonderfully done. And I'm glad that we're here today. When the pandemic started, the first data that came out showed that it did not affect kids. And if you could recall back, everybody said, kids are going to be fine, they don't get sick. And that progressed throughout the first, I'd say, year. And then we started to see an uptick in the kids who were infected. We do know that the majority of them, to answer your question specifically, are asymptomatic. They are, I usually compare them to the Aedes aegypti mosquito and dengue. The dengue virus does not affect the mosquito at all, but that mosquito is the vector. The children in this pandemic are vectors. They get sick, they visit their older relatives, grandparents, uncles and aunts, who then get sick and then end up in hospital. Most of the time when they get ill, they're asymptomatic. And I could tell you, since this surge has hit Belize very hard now.
You're talking especially about the Delta variant.
The Delta variant. My phone has been ringing off the hook with parents who are sick, with children, and they want to know what to do with the symptoms. Say, Doc, there's a little cough, cold, runny nose, a kid with a cough and a low-grade fever. What should I do? And I run through it with them one by one, but then I give them the danger signs. Severe shortness of breath, severe lethargy. If they become they cough, and can't catch the breath, those are the times to come to the hospital.
Now, I like where you started because I think that's very important. When the child does display any kind of symptoms, even though we may say they're asymptomatic, what can you detect in a child that would lead you to undo, one, the symptoms first, but also, do the children take tests and how is that managed?
Well, that's an excellent question. Most of the kids who are picked up are not symptomatic. Most of them are traced by the able staff of the Ministry of Health, who do the contact tracing for people who are positive, and then they would check everybody in that home. Most of the kids that are picked up that way. Few of them are symptomatic, but most of them can be traced to a positive relative.
And so if they do, since you're saying most of them are not symptomatic, what kind of symptoms would a child perhaps display that should lead to some concern?
Well, most of them are asymptomatic, but the symptoms that would make us worry a little bit would be if there is any shortness of breath, if the kid starts to get lethargic and not eating, if the kid if it's an infant, stops drinking, then, and with very high fevers, those are the symptoms you worry about. And we would tell you then visit your doc or get to the nearest hospital.
Now, as we're talking, and I want to bring Dr. Baer in at this point as well, have we seen any children actually being hospitalized as a result of COVID-19 at this point?
Well,
I'll talk nationally first,
yes.
And then globally.
Yeah. There have been an increase in the number of children hospitalized. It's still not a large number, but...
and by children, we're referring to anyone under 18.
Under 18, yes.
Yeah.
We have a database of 1,600 kids infected with COVID-19. And from that database, 44% are the group 12 to 17 that we're targeting currently. The rest is below 12 years. So the importance of the vaccines, you know. These siblings are at home with the younger kids. They play with them. They take care of them. So the more family members get vaccinated, we confer better protection to the younger kids.
Now, let's break it into two sections. One, we're talking about the Pfizer vaccine for those between 12 and 17. What has been the reaction so far and uptake in terms of schools, the participation that you've had, or the attitudes from schools and also from parents themselves so far that you've recognized as the ministry?
Well, at this point, it's still too early to have a more accurate answer for your question, because remember, we are starting today. It's only Belize who had a vaccination site open for 12 to 17 on Saturday. But we have to wait a while. We are working closely with the Ministry of Education. We're making sure that the parents receive all the information that they need to receive before signing the consent forms. The Ministry of Education have a platform where the consent form can be signed digitally. We also have, for walk-ins, the printed copies where the parent can sign at the vaccination site.
Now, today, Pfizer actually received full approval for children above 16, right? 16 and above. What does that really mean on the ground?
Remember, the vaccines, the majority of them have received emergency use authorization, and they have been going through a process. And Pfizer, for example, the process started for approval since December 11. And since then until today, when we start our vaccination for school-age children, there have been 8 important moments for Pfizer. 4 moments in December, which is the approval It started out with the FDA providing emergency authorization for the Pfizer, then went to the WHO, they give their authorization. We had the Australian Therapeutic Agency, EMA, which is the European, they also gave their approval in that process. We had another approval or reissuing of approval, even from FDA, one in February, one in March, and then the last one in May, which is authorizing this age group, 12 to 17, by the FDA. And we'll know the full approval. It means that it's just confirming the safety of the vaccine.
Now, you used two words, and I want to dissect those because I think that's important. One, you spoke about an emergency authorization, and now you're talking about full approval.
Yeah.
What's the difference? And perhaps Dr. Eck, you can jump in as well, you know, between the two terms, because I think that's important for people to understand.
Well, how most of these drugs or vaccines are accredited or approved is that it's a process that it has to go through. With the Food and Drug Administration of America, the FDA, these guys have pre-clinical exploratory trials. After that is done, usually it takes a couple of years. You go into phase 1, which are volunteers. You take the vaccine, you check the immunogenicity, if it works, and if it's safe. This is between 20 to 100 people. If it's safe and effective, you go on to stage 2 trials, maybe a couple hundred. And then stage 3 trials, which is happening now. With Pfizer, it's 44,000 people that were tested over a long period of time. Throughout this whole process, takes a couple of years, but during a pandemic, that last phase is people would say they give us emergency approval to use it because it's safe and effective and it will save lives now.
Yep.
The last part is long-term study, and in this case, it's 6 months. You get the emergency approval after 2 months, and after 4 months, that is when you get the full accreditation or approval. That happened today.
Yeah.
Dr. Baer, you wanted to say something?
No, just the value of all COVID-19 vaccines is the saving lives. I mean, the more we delay that process of getting vaccines to the population, we have countries that have reported that they are using vaccines that are not yet approved. Remember, we have more than 250 vaccines that are being produced worldwide. But
against COVID?
Yes.
I have no idea.
Just a few have gotten this far with approval. Just to reassure to the public that the scientific process of developing the vaccine, that has not been sacrificed. And that could explain why not every vaccine that is being produced is approved. Because you have to meet the criteria, otherwise they won't pass it.
Now, you're raising a point that flagged something within my mind's eye as well. The whole idea that this is an accelerated process because of the pandemic that we're experiencing, and because the overall or overarching rationale is that it's saving lives. What do you say to people who are saying, well, the process is just too fast? I don't have any faith in this because you're just moving too quickly. How do you reassure someone that enough data has been collected to ground it in science, not in emotions, but in science?
Yeah, it's just that the COVID-19 vaccines were not developed in a vacuum. I mean, the technology for the different platforms was already there. And the technology for the development of the vaccine was already there. And I think that is what helped the world to have access earlier to these vaccines, no?
To piggyback on that, remember in 2003, SARS-CoV-1 came along. And that was an awful bug. It wasn't very transmissible. But if you got it, 50 to 70% of people died. That was how high the mortality rate was. And it was then that a lot of money was thrown at it to develop sequencing, to develop these new platforms that we use today. And so when this SARS-CoV-2 came along, everything was set for us to just plug in a different component into this algorithm and get maybe 1 or 2 years off of it. But it was there already. So it's like you telling me, Doc, why should I not walk from Ladyville? You have a bike. Use the bike. Yeah. It was developed. You shouldn't come along and say, I'm not using that bike. I don't trust it. I'm going to walk. Well, along with the walking would come, in this case, a lot of deaths. Yeah. And that's why it was, the vaccine was given emergency approval. And today is a special day for them because they've gone through the gamut of all the trials. They've done it, and it's safe and effective.
Now, I want to, just quickly push another button here, because some people are saying, well, if most children are asymptomatic, why give them the vaccine? And I know you kind of answered it previously, yeah, but I want to reiterate that point.
Well, remember, we have no confirmed cases of variants of concern. And Delta, for example, affect more kids and adults, no? The increase in the transmission in the number of cases is up to 60% compared to the original virus. And as I was mentioning earlier, if there is a home with 6 persons and 2 or 3 are above 18 years, the majority of the vaccines are for adults. The kids are not protected. But with this, with the Pfizer vaccine now, we can reach the group from 12 to 17, and then that would leave us just with the younger kids. But then there will be more protection at the home for these kids, with all persons that are eligible for a vaccine receiving the vaccines. We also have to consider that kids right now, 12 to 17, they only have one option. Out of the 10, 12 vaccines that are already approved, it's only one available for them. And the rest, adults, have a myriad of vaccines that they can choose from when they become available in country. So we have to consider that too. The production of the vaccine is still a volatile situation. The experts say the best vaccine is the one you're being offered now, because there is so much uncertainty with the production. The next issue is children are the one them who probably have suffered much more than anyone due to COVID-19, because we don't have figures yet how much they have been affected when the family lost a job because of COVID, when they lost loved ones because of COVID. They are not going to school, so they are exposed to whatever dangerous environment they are living in. So there is a lot of issues surrounding these kids as a consequence of COVID-19. So if we get them vaccinated, then we will be in a better position when there is conditions to open the school so that they can go back and meet their friends. Friends are so important for them at that age.
With 2 more things I'd like to add. One is I was asked a question by a producer about COVID deaths. How many, and can we specify? And it got me thinking, because on my ward during the COVID outbreak, when no flights were coming in, I had a kid who had a heart surgery and needed a second surgery to get him whole again. He died on my ward because there were no flights coming in or out of Belize. And I would ask her then, is that a COVID death or not? The first point. Second point is what Dr. Beer quite rightly said. We could talk about ones who are infected or not, or asymptomatic. But I also would tell you about the many patients I've had come in with anxiety issues, panic attack, missing their friends at school, the ones who need that auditory input to get their grades up, who can't deal with this through the device teaching. So it has affected them a lot.
Now, before we go to break and before we have our guests from the Ministry of Education, I think there's one other question that I need to ask. You have these vaccines, as you said, Dr. Bear, that are largely for adults. how do you determine the age range for a vaccine? Because traditionally we know in Belize that you take a vaccine as a child. What is so different with these vaccines that you have it being segmented to either adults or teens, and then there's no protection being offered in other cases?
Yeah. You'll be surprised how adults ask when the vaccine will be available for the smaller kids. But we use data to make decisions. So the largest number of cases were adult population. Last year in Belize, we had 80% of the person who died were above 60 years. And then the next group that confirmed the majority of the cases and deaths also were persons way in age but had comorbidities. So I'm just showing Belize data, but that was what was happening worldwide also. So the push for the vaccine was to address or reach to those who were mostly affected. Remember, kids were not that much affected. So right after that, even before approving for adults, the studies started also with kids. And that's why we have no approval for this age group now that we're covering, 12 to 17. Studies ongoing currently for children 6 months up to 11 years, trying to reach and cover that population also.
So, excellent question. What determines who gets it is who the illness would affect. Mm-hmm. So when this illness was initially identified, kids would be dying. The vaccine that was created would have been created aimed at them. And then we'd start to check on me and you in old age. But in this case, the elderly were the ones who were affected. Mm-hmm. And so in that first cohort of people that was studied, it was to save lives, so they put them first. And then down the road, you look at comorbidities, pregnant women, people who are breastfeeding, and you go right down to the ones that it affects the least. So that's maybe the answer to your question.
All right, and I know the producer is coming back, so we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we return, we'll be joined by the CEO in the Ministry of Education, Diane Mejia. Don't go anywhere. Get the Facts continues after these messages.
Why should you wear your mask? To protect myself. My friends. My family and others. I wear my mask because I love my grandparents. With so many reasons to wear a mask, we continue to advise persons to wear a face mask properly, covering both nose and mouth. Together, we can keep Belize COVID-19 safe.
At Belize Diagnostic Center, we offer FDA-approved PCR testing for COVID-19. Get your results as quickly as 1 hour. Don't risk getting exposed to COVID-19 by going elsewhere. We take appointments, or we can come to your home or office using our concierge service with no additional fees. We have 10 locations countrywide. Call or WhatsApp us at 613-TEST. That is 613-8378 to schedule your test today.
With the rise in COVID cases and youths being infected, it is time to be safe and stay safe with SAFE, Sanitization and Fumigation of Environments. Let our professionally trained and certified team be your solution to a clean, healthier, and safe environment for your home or business. For more information, call or WhatsApp 613-0222 or visit us at 2.5 miles Philip Golson Highway beside Friendship Restaurant. Choose the one you can trust. Choose safe.
Save, save, save. The credit union way.
Member owners are encouraged to save regularly, borrow wisely, and repay promptly.
No use keeping the money in your pocket. Soon as you turn wrong, you know you ain't got it. So as money goes from hand to hand, give your cash to the umbrella man. I telling you, save, save, save. The credit union way. Save, save, save. It will make you rich someday.
As Belize continues to shield its people from the worst ravages of this pandemic, we must continue to keep our country safe by ensuring reliable supply chains for critical components for the fight ahead. Belize's oxygen supply is safe with 300% more oxygen supply in country than is necessary. However, Fabregas continues to make our oxygen supply chain even more robust and responsive to a potential worst-case scenario. Through supply arrangements established and secured by Fabregas, our country can receive critical life-saving oxygen from 5 regional neighbors in Mexico and Central America through marine and/or land transportation. So, in addition, Fabregas has secured additional reliable sources of life-saving oxygen using a diversity of transportation modes and countries of origin. Fabregas Belize Limited. We got your back.
How does the AstraZeneca vaccine work? The vaccine provides support to help your body develop immunity to the virus that causes COVID-19. The body is left with a supply of memory cells that will remember how to fight the virus. It takes a few weeks for the body to produce the antibodies after vaccination. How long does it take to build immunity after taking the first dose of the vaccine? There is protection 14 days after a person's first dose. However, that initial protection may decline over time, which is the reason why it is so important to get the second shot. How long after the first dose should one take the second dose? The second dose should be given between week 8 and week 12. Are there any deaths associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine? There have been no deaths associated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. Vaccines save lives. They remain the safest, most effective, and cost-effective medical tool developed. Increased uptake of the vaccine is the best way to stop this pandemic, save lives, and return to normalcy.
Welcome back to Get the Facts. Remember, this is an interactive conversation, so you can submit your questions via our Facebook page. And of course, at the end of tonight's show, we'll have a segment dedicated to questions and answers. So if you want to do that, you can do it by video, or you can just submit it by text or written on our Facebook page. But we're moving into our second segment on the impact of COVID-19 on our children. And joining me for this conversation, this segment, is the CEO in the Ministry of Education, Culture, Science and Technology, Mrs. Diane Mejia. Good evening, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Now, as CEO, I want to just start with, why did the ministry advocate for the vaccine, or the Pfizer vaccine in particular?
Well, I think if I can piggyback on what your previous guest said, it is simply because we knew that that was the vaccine that would be safe for the children to take. And so we thought that would be critical for us to have, that we would be able to give the vaccine to the children, and that would be one way for us to be able to return safely to the classroom. So we're so excited that the rollout has actually happened now, that we have students who have actually begun to get vaccinated, and the administration of the vaccines is going to be happening, starting now through this week, and we're really hoping that it's going to be well received. We believe that the combination of having the students be vaccinated, along with having the teachers be vaccinated, the parents at home, and then of course having everyone continue to follow the protocols that we know can work, that these are going to be the mitigating factors that will make it safe for us to return to the classroom, hopefully very soon.
Now, you're talking about a return to the classroom, and some people were advocating very early on to say, listen, it's not time for our children to return to the classrooms, especially given this third wave that we're experiencing. What does the vaccine hold in terms of opportunities for the return to the classroom?
Well, I'm not the doctor here, but I can tell you that my understanding is that with the vaccine, we are safer, because even if we get COVID, there is more likelihood that the disease will not be so severe. The risks are not going to be so high. And that really is what we're going to need. If this is something that we have to live with, right? We have to learn all the factors that are going to help us. And yes, those factors will include, you know, making sure that we have a healthy diet, making sure that we get enough exercise, making sure that we wear our masks and we clean our hands and we cough into our elbow, you know, keeping our distance from one another. Those are all things that are important. And I think the one thing that we want to emphasize is that it's not just one thing that's going to help. The vaccine is a part of everything that we need to do, because whether you are a parent or a teacher or a principal at any level of the system, we all know that it is absolutely critical to get the children back into the classroom. But we need to do so safely. You know, no one wants anyone to be sick. And so we have to do all that we can do. We can't just wear a mask and then, you know, not wash our hands or not watch our distance with one another. We have to do all the things that work together so that we can try to achieve the ultimate goal, which is to return to the classroom safely.
Now, CEO, one of the things that people were pushing for immediately was to say, what we need to do is just strictly go online. What's the ministry's position on that, and why was it a wait and see kind of process for the ministry?
So our position has always been that we want to return to the classroom, but that we want to do so safely, and that we would have been guided, and we continue to be guided by the recommendations of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Because our first preference is to be back in the classroom physically, we actually have been working, our schools have been working to do just that. Plans have been in place, you know, all the physical preparations, the things that needed to happen for a physical reopening, those things were all well underway. Really what stopped it was the Ministry of Health and Wellness's recommendation to us, because that's what we want to happen, you know. It's true, you're absolutely right. There are people who, for weeks and months even, have been saying, you know, don't even bother trying. But we felt that it was important to still try. We really haven't lost anything by having the things that we needed to have in readiness, prepared, right? So we did that. We started the effort to do so. The reality is that distance learning is hard. It's hard for everyone. And whether your child, no matter what the age, whether your child from preschool and 3 and 4 years old to junior college and, you know, 17 and 18, no matter what the age, it's hard. And no matter what the method, it's hard. Because every parent in this country, every parent across the world now, knows that there's really no substitute for the face-to-face instruction, for that consistent chance for a teacher to be in front of your child, to impart. There's no substitute for that, you know. There's no substitute for the children for being with their friends, for the teacher being able to look at the classroom and gauge, who's understanding me, who's not understanding based on how the children are looking. You know this, Will, you've been a teacher, right? When you're in the classroom, you can judge who's with you and who's not. You can knock on the desk if somebody's falling asleep or touch the child who needs a little bit of reassurance. There's no substitute for that. And, paper-based packages really are so difficult because how do they hold us accountable? We can't be sure who does the work. We can't be sure when the work gets checked. How do we know what's correct and what's wrong? How do we give the feedback? We can't guarantee teaching and learning.
But let me just ask and be a kind of a devil's advocate. I don't particularly like that term, but some people will say, well, we grew up and we are digital migrants, so for us it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. But for the children who are digital natives, they grew up using their tablets, etc. This is how they learn anyway, through the YouTube, university, etc. So why not go that route if it's going to mean greater safety?
No, that's a really a good point, right? Because I think that the transition to the technological, to the digital, that it's been harder on the adults than it has been on the children, definitely. And it's true that they function better. Their fingers swipe and move and they're able to navigate platforms and applications in a way that is almost impossible for an adult to understand. So yes, that is true. And it absolutely makes sense for us wherever we can to use the technology to teach them, right? We need to, and that's part of why we have to make every effort to make sure that the students have devices, that they have adequate internet access, that teachers have devices and internet access, to make sure that we can teach the teachers how to teach using the technology, because it's not automatic, right? But even having said all of that, there's no substitute for the face-to-face. There's no substitute for the human interaction. The most technologically savvy child still misses his friends, right? Because this is the blight of the pandemic, that we can't be with our friends the way we want to, that we can't, there's no recess, there's no, just being together the way that we have been together all our lives. And so that's the thing that's hardest, I think. Academically, and even to a certain extent psychologically, the transition is hard, because we have to, especially those of us who are older, we have to figure out, how do we adjust? How do we get used to this? I'm not used to teaching like this. I'm not used to delivering a lesson like this. But really, when it comes right down to it, I think the hardest thing is at the heart of it, that we know that the children miss their friends, the teachers miss their students, the students miss their teachers, and that's why we need to vaccinate them, because the vaccination is one part of what needs to happen so that we can get them back.
Now, I know we have the John Donne adage that no man is an island, unto himself. Now, when you're talking about that and the psychological need that we have for human interaction, how do we address that, given that most kids have been out almost 2 years?
Yeah.
How are we going to deal with that? And is there any way that the ministry is looking at, perhaps, I don't know if you can correct it, but if you can alleviate the impact of that on our children?
Well, there are a couple of things. Obviously, there's no magic solution to this, because this is hard. But we can work with our teachers to help them to learn how to engage more with the students via distance learning. 2 years ago, when we weren't sure what was going to happen. We weren't sure how this pandemic thing was going to play out, right? So it was one thing for us to start off and say, okay, then you'll submit a lesson and you'll sign in. And we weren't, all of us, necessarily as focused on figuring out how to keep connections. But now we need to. And so where we can invest the time and the energy, as we are, in trying to show the teachers ways to engage the students, I think that is an important thing to do. It's not just about teaching math or teaching reading. It's also about teaching so that you stay connected, right? It's about trying to make sure that when they're those who are doing online learning, that when they're putting on their cameras, that the teacher is there to say, hey, what's up? How are you? Looking at the little faces, even if it says boxes on a screen, that's a way to see and to engage, right? So we have to work on that. We have to work on trying to make sure that no matter how we are delivering distance learning, that we still try to stay engaged.
How, before we go to break and we get some questions from our audience, one of the things is, how does the ministry intend to retool and equip teachers who may have been away or are full victims of the digital divide? Because sometimes, we look at things as adults and we see TikTok as a game. But there are opportunities for education,
right.
For that to be a channel as well. So how do we actually, as a ministry and as a country, retool our teachers to rethink their views on technology as an educational tool?
Well, I think one thing that we started, which has been a phenomenal tool, is we started the Teacher Learning Institute as a virtual platform. So, I mean, the new administration has a commitment to the formation of the Teacher Learning Institute. And we recognized months ago that there's no way we could do this as a physical building. So we launched the Teacher Learning Institute as a virtual platform on August 1st. And I can tell you that within the first 2 weeks, we had over 50% of our teachers already engaged on that. And what that does is, just from the mere fact that you are on the TLI taking a class, you also, of necessity, know what it feels like to be a student online. There's no substitute for experience, right? So in allowing the teachers to, one, complete their professional development courses, which they need to do as a matter of course, they're also able to really experience what it's like to be students again in this technological world. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, we're going to need to really develop a focus on counselors. School counselors are going to be just magical in this time, not because they will have magic wands, but because they are going to help the rest of us with the tools to really address the issues that have come to light now and that will be coming to light more and more as we go on.
I like the fact that you're talking about counselors, because I'm sure teachers are also frustrated.
Yeah.
And while, being a teacher, that I don't have 5 kids running around in my house, or that I also have to cook or do all of those things. So the challenge is for teachers. What kind of coping mechanisms are you equipping teachers with as well to be able to manage their homes? Because unfortunately, especially given the fact that the majority are usually women who are given the brunt of raising children and doing everything else within the home, how do you actually equip them to deal with those pressures, ease their frustrations, and still be professional and deliver to the children that they're given the responsibility for educationally?
Since last year, there have been really courses offered specifically to help teachers in that way. Last summer it was Thriving in Uncertain Times, right? And we had hundreds and hundreds of our teachers who chose to register for that course. This year, there were variations of that, you know, taking that same concept and breaking it into chunks, and really trying to reach that same goal is showing the teachers how they themselves can manage at a time that is, you know, so stressful that no one has ever lived before, when they're expected to be the ones who have the answers, you know, and we know that that's really, really such a difficult place to be in.
Well, with that said, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we return, we will be joined by our full slate of panelists for tonight to field questions. Do submit yours. After the break, we'll be answering all the questions that you may have. Don't go anywhere. Get the Facts returns after these messages.
No sense at all. No kind of sense. That Belize video when I have that sign up there in China for.
That not in China at all, that in Spanish.
You understand what it said then?
Yeah. It said wear your face mask properly, cover your nose and your mouth.
Will help prevent the spread of COVID to others. Together we could make Belize safe.
Wear your mask properly over your mouth and nose to protect yourself and others. Together we can keep Belize COVID-19 safe.
Looking good, Mom. Hey guys, I'm off to run some errands. Please tidy up this place. No! How did you guys do it?
We got cleaners.
Cleaners?
You know it, Dad.
Cleaner. It works.
The convenient and flavorful way to give your immune system a daily boost of vitamin C. Just pop the cap, drop it in water, let it fizz, and enjoy.
And welcome back to our question and answer segment for Get the Facts. Of course, our focus tonight is the impact of COVID on our children. And our panelists now include Dr. Baer, Dr. Eck, and CEO Mejia. So let's jump into our first question. We have quite a number of questions lined up. Get the facts. So if you get enough kids from 12 to 17 vaccinated and somehow return to the classroom, will it still be as a hybrid schedule? Secondly, since most of the pre and primary school age kids won't get the vaccine, what is the way forward for that age group? And I guess that goes to you, CEO.
Okay, that's fine. The answer to the first question is yes. We will still return with some kind of hybrid schedule. And that is simply because we need to continue with observing the protocols. And that includes social distancing. So if you have a classroom, for example, that cannot hold 30 children with the requisite spacing, the school will still need to have maybe 2 groups. So there will still be staggered schedules, shifted schedules, that sort of thing, right? So whenever we return, as long as we need to continue to observe COVID protocols, as we expect that we do in the future, we will be having a hybrid schedule. Okay, so that's a yes. And then if my response to the second question there would have been that the pre and primary school students who are unable to get vaccinated at this time need more than ever for the rest of us who can get vaccinated to be vaccinated, because that is how we will protect them. So this time right now, when the 12 to 17-year-olds can get vaccinated, that is the time that we spend to do that, so that when we return, there's going to be a smaller population, a smaller sector of our population who would not have the protection of the vaccine.
And the ripple effect, right, of the younger children bringing it home to our parents.
Absolutely.
The next question is, my child is 13, has sickle cell. Is he safe to take the vaccine?
Yes.
Simply put, yes. Let's go to the...
But to answer and piggyback, my phone has been ringing off the hook from since Saturday. And I tell everybody with asthma, insect allergies, eczema, allergic rhinitis, hay fever, what we in Belize we call sinus, all of those guys can come in and get their vaccines. Sickle cell is in the group.
All right. Let's go to our next question. What happens if you are unaware you have COVID asymptomatic? You are COVID asymptomatic and take the vaccine.
We have had cases, a few cases like that, and there is no problem with that. We recommend that a person that is COVID-19 positive, that they know they are positive and we know they are positive, then we defer the vaccination. But nothing happens if the person is asymptomatic, doesn't know they have the COVID, and we don't know they have the COVID. It's not a problem.
Okay, let's see our next question. Does the ministry have a plan to assist students in rural areas with internet and devices?
Yes, we do. The challenges, of course, will vary, because in some rural areas, it will be easier to assist with getting internet access than with others. But it is something that we are actively working on. By this Friday of this week, we should have a new survey in from all the secondary schools that would help us to know the status of those schools, what their needs are, because yes, we are working towards bridging the gaps there as much as possible.
All right. Thank you very much, CEO. The next question. Can we get the facts from the ministry? That is part of the problem. How comes the ministry has no data about breakthrough infections or the side effects of those who have been vaccinated?
We do have data. I would just apologize right now not having it on hand, but we do have data of persons who have been hospitalized, vaccinated.
Breakthrough cases.
Yes, vaccinated. So it's not a large amount. The majority of the hospitalizations due to COVID is among unvaccinated persons. But we do have, so we will have it probably for the next time you invite us.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. What is the survival or recovery rate in terms of percentages for children under 16 if they happen to contract COVID-19? Since it is 99.98%, why vaccinate the children? We kind of dealt with that a little bit earlier, but maybe an abridged version of the answer.
I think the important thing is the 1 point whatever percent. If that 1% is your kid, it's very, very, very important. And so not only what was quoted was the mortality rate, but we have to look at morbidity rate. How about the kids who survive who end up with issues afterwards? When it's preventable, this is like measles and polio, it's now preventable. So.
Thank you, Doc. The next question reads, what are the risks for pregnant women to contract COVID-19?
What are the risks?
Yeah, for pregnant women.
Yes. Currently, if we go to the SAGE recommendations, they are still having certain restrictions for pregnant women. But one have to look at their local data to make decision. And we're in that process right now, looking at our local data. Since we started, since COVID-19 started in March 2020, we have documented more than 300 pregnant women positive with COVID-19. But since we diagnose now or confirm the circulation of the variants of concern, we are concerned with the increase in the number of women being hospitalized during pregnancy. So we know we have to make that decision now, although it's still not yet blanket for all pregnant women to get the vaccine. It's still on a risk-benefit basis. But there are 40+ countries that are already vaccinating their pregnant women blanket. So we're looking at that data, and probably by the end of this week, we should have a response.
Thank you, Doc. The next question reads, what consideration will be done if not all primary school students will be vaccinated and some younger students are not required to use face masks?
Well, at this time, we do not have an across-the-board ruling or restriction that says that all children must be vaccinated, right? What we're doing is we're encouraging the children, just as we're encouraging the teachers and everyone else to be vaccinated, but there is no rule that says that if you're not vaccinated, for example, that you can't go to school.
But face masks are mandated.
Yes, yes, yeah. And so they have been since last year, right? When we had the phased-in return to face-to-face last year between April and June, it was with the understanding that face masks were mandatory at school for everyone, yes.
And in all honesty, our children are better at following the rules than we are.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think that needs to be highlighted as well. Let's go to our next question. How is it that before taking the vaccine, we are not tested to see if we're positive or negative?
We're following the WHO recommendations, and it is not necessary. It's not a requirement for you to get tested if you are positive or not. You can get the vaccine.
You know, Doc, I really want us, I know it's just question and answers, but that's something that really comes up on a regular basis, especially given the fact that, you know, some of the misinformation is that certain individuals, they know they were COVID positive, they took the vaccine and they died. Is there any data to actually substantiate that?
When we have a report of cases like these through the surveillance system, we have to conduct an investigation, and one have to look at the day when the person got positive, the day when they took the vaccine, and look at the incubation period, which is from 2 to 14 days. And then if we do an autopsy, we have to rely on the results from the autopsy to come up with a conclusion on that cause of death. So it's not simple as that we can just call it as a cause of the vaccine. There is a process that we need to follow.
Okay. Let's go to, we have 2 more questions before we go to our break. What are some of the challenges with online learning, and how does the ministry plan to address this?
Well, there are lots of challenges with online learning. I mean, from the physical challenges of making sure that everyone has access to devices and internet, to the technical challenges of making sure that the teachers know how to teach properly using the online methods, to the socio-emotional challenges of having the children be apart and alone or isolated at home. And the ministry, I think we had mentioned before, is working to address these 3 things. First, by trying to provide devices, address the need and fill the gaps where we can. Second, by working to teach the teachers how they can deliver online learning in a more effective way. And then third, by encouraging teachers to engage students as much as possible, no matter what their methods are, and by planning that so that we make sure that we have counselors and we have counseling available for the teachers and for the students as a support for when we can, as we continue really, and as we get back to face-to-face.
All right, thank you very much, CEO. The next question and final question for this segment: what are the ingredients of the vaccine?
Well, the vaccine have a portion of the S spike or S protein, and that is the one that once it enters into the body, it triggers the immune system to develop antibody against that spike that is needed for the virus to enter the cells and cause the disease. And then we have other components that are used for stabilization of the vaccine. Compared to other vaccines, is nothing much different. Lipids, translated in layman words, lipids or fats, sugar, and salt. But in chemical components, no, is mainly what is put together to ensure the stabilization of the vaccine.
And we do have to go to break, but there's nothing in there that is a tracking device.
We already have that with the phones and the tablets and the computer. And
thank you very much.
No.
We're going to go ahead and take a final break, and when we come back, our panelists will give you their final words for tonight. Don't go anywhere. Get the Facts concludes after these messages.
As Belize continues to shield its people from the worst ravages of this pandemic, we must continue to keep our country safe by ensuring reliable supply chains for critical components for the fight ahead. Belize's oxygen supply is safe with 300% more oxygen supply in country than is necessary. However, Fabregas continues to make our oxygen supply chain even more robust and responsive to a potential worst-case scenario. Through supply arrangements established and secured by Fabregas, our country can receive critical life-saving oxygen from 5 regional neighbors in Mexico and Central America through marine and/or land transportation. So, in addition, Fabregas has secured additional reliable sources of life-saving oxygen using a diversity of transportation modes and countries of origin. Fabregas Belize Limited. We got your back.
We approach the fight against COVID-19 in the way we approach many other challenges, by looking for ways to achieve joint solutions and staying resolved to help our people. I know how anxious we are to see life returning to some normalcy. The COVID-19 vaccine offers our country a reason to hope. We are in this together. I will be safe when we are all safe. I believe in the COVID-19 vaccine. I have taken the COVID-19 vaccine and I urge you to take it too. #GetVaccinated_Belize.
It is my time
to protect your life.
Don't wait to vaccinate.
I believe in the COVID-19 vaccine.
The vaccine is the best way to protect lives.
Don't wait, vaccinate.
Don't hesitate, Belize.
Vaccinate. Be COVID-19 safe. If you care,
love them.
Protect them.
Vaccinate them.
At Belize Diagnostic Center, we offer FDA-approved PCR testing for COVID-19. Get your results as quickly as 1 hour. Don't risk getting exposed to COVID-19 by going elsewhere. We take appointments or we can come to your home or office using our concierge service with no additional fees. We have 10 locations countrywide. Call or WhatsApp us at 613-TEST. That is 613-8378 to schedule your test today.
Welcome back. We're getting ready to wrap our show for tonight. Of course, this is another in the series, Get the Facts. And we've been focusing on the impact of COVID on our children. So to close tonight's show, we're going to ask each one of our panelists to take about 30 seconds to 2 minutes to give their final words. Dr. Baer, let me start with you.
Okay, I would just like to reassure the public that the government of Belize is committed to securing vaccines for every person in need of the vaccine in Belize. Along with our partners, like UNICEF, PAHO, Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank is now coming on board. And it's a concerted effort from different ministries. It's not only the Ministry of Health, we have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Education, which is key for the younger population that we are vaccinating. The second point I would like to remind ourselves is that the virus is transmitted from person to person. And the vaccine will make us safer. But as CEO Mejia was mentioning earlier, that we must continue with the preventive measures. Wearing face masks properly, covering nose and chin, avoiding crowds, washing hands, and the physical distancing. The next point I would like to raise is the issue of vaccines are low-cost intervention, and they save lives. Belize, we have good track record when it comes to immunization. We have eradicated polio since 1981. We have eradicated measles, although we have threat with neighboring countries that have measles, but we try our best to keep the vaccination coverage up to date. And the last point is encourage parents to get their children vaccinated, to support them, because it's the only way we can give our children a chance to be safer against COVID-19. There is a lot we don't know about the disease itself, but what we know is the effectiveness of the vaccine in protecting against infection and reducing the cases of severe illness and hospitalizations due to COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baer. And with that, we've come to the end of tonight's show. You took 6 minutes.
No, man. 1 minute.
Dr. Baer. Dr. Eck?
Oh, I thought I was saved from this final statement. The first issue is I like the show, and I like the initiative, and big up Miss Marlene for me when you see her. It is a good initiative, and I've always said that people of Belize need more information. I love the question about the data, and I've always said we need to show some pie charts and some graphs, people look on it and say, oh, this is what is happening, so that we can interpret it and maybe get more reassured that nobody is hiding anything from anyone. The second point I have to make is that this illness is real. This isn't anything made up. I think, and I'll maybe jump in your chest a little bit in telling you that I think the media has failed in showing the true picture of this thing. And I've said it in multiple forums. You need, come to ENE, you need to show people, you need to get, I like the advertisement with the young lady who gave a really heartfelt thought process about what happened with her dad, and he died, and we need more of that. We need people to look at it for real. We have people who work at KHMH every day, and I know it takes a big toll on them. And again, I would like a camera crew to follow one of them around on their one day in the life of doctor or nurse, whoever, so that you see them in these suits and the sweat that come off when they remove the suit, to see when they cry in the evening time. This is not anything that's made up. When it first started, everybody was, they locked down San Pedro for 2 patients. We have the light at the end of the tunnel now. Use it. This isn't anything that we made up to sterilize you in 7 years. We have it. Really what happened today is that a vaccine that is safe and effective was accredited. We have it now in Belize. Most of the other Caribbean territories don't have it. It is available for our 12 to 17-year-old kids. My little daughter Rianne got it on Saturday. And it was she who told me. She said, "Daddy, they're giving this thing, my friends are on TikTok or wherever." So I closed my office, we got her, and she got her shot. We need to protect our kids. She was the last one in my home that was without a vaccine. So I'm a little more reassured today.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Eck. And CEO, before we go, I have to ask you this one question though. Because the focus has been on in-school children. What about those who are out of school? And I know one of the challenges is you're also having a large dropout, or significant, I don't know how large, but population is primarily young men.
Yeah.
How do you capture them?
We've been trying to reach them the way we've been trying to reach everyone else. You don't have to be in school to come to get a vaccine. You can just come, all right? We do need the parental consent forms because that's what the Ministry of Health is asking for.
Can you get it at the location?
Yes, you can just walk in and get the form. You know, the responsible adult can sign the form for you and you can get your vaccine. You don't have to be in school. And even though the schedule attempts to guide, just because of the sheer volume, the numbers that we're dealing with, so the schedule attempts to put a guide to it, but really no one is going to be turned away. You know, the students who have special needs, the children who have special needs, accommodations are made on site. Today, I know that my nephew was able to receive his vaccine. He was not able to come out of the car, but they drove up and the nurse came to the window and she gave him his vaccine. You know, I like you, Doc, my youngest got his vaccine, and in spite of asking me if I was sure he wasn't going to turn into a lizard, I said, "I promise you, son, you won't turn into a lizard." I sat with him and watched him to make sure he wouldn't turn green, and he didn't. And that's the thing. We all have a part to play. We all can together make a difference here. Yeah. Everyone who wants those children to be safe, everyone, we want, as parents, we want our children to be safe. We want them to be happy. We cannot really have successful educational opportunities. We cannot have successful personal experiences for our children if they continue to only be at home. So we need to work together as a people, and getting vaccinated is a part of what we need to do. So we get vaccinated, and then we wear our mask, we wash our hands, and we watch our distance.
And with that said, this has been another in the series of Get the Facts. I'm your host, William Neal. Be sure to join us next week when we'll bring another show focusing on a particular area, and you'll get an opportunity to ask all the questions that you may have. Thank you for joining us. Good night. God bless you all.